Sri Lanka is facing its worst financial crisis in its independence history. No sign of respite for 22 million people. There is no food in the country. 1 million people fallen into poverty. There is no fuel. There is no medicine. Critical surgeries have been cancelled. Doctors say economic crisis will kill more people than COVID did. There are daily blackouts and ongoing wide-scale protests on the street. What's happening to Sri Lanka is much more than an economic crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. The question is, how did this all happen? And how are we going to get about it? We will answer all these questions today. Hello there, a warm welcome. This is Shobia Clinton inviting you on another episode on COTV, A Voice That Matters. On today's show, we have an expert economist with us. Dr. Harsha de Silva is here with us. Welcome to the show, Dr. Harsha.
Thank you.
Tell us, how are we going to overcome all these issues?
It's not that easy. You know, we are the only country in Asia to have gone bankrupt in the last 50 years. So we have fallen really, down. So to get back up is going to be difficult. There's no point in trying to say, look, in 3 months' time things will be better. No, it won't be better. Because we need to really do some major reforms. People will have to learn to live within their means. Public, private, government, everyone. What does that really mean? That means our demand will have to fall. If our demand doesn't fall, we will not be able to meet import requirements. Say it is fuel or LP gas or cheese, So the way to get out of this is going to be austerity. And that's going to be hard because we're used to a particular lifestyle. We were never a poor country. We were always a middle-income country. And by 2019, we were an upper middle-income country. After upper middle-income country, you're a developed country. So we were at the bottom of the one below developed level. And then suddenly we crashed, came crumbling down. So, our people are used to, like I said, certain creature comforts, certain luxuries, right? And how are we going to do without these things at a particular level in society? But at the middle, it's going to be very difficult because a lot of people are on fixed salaries, right? So when everything goes up in price, your salaries don't go up in order to compensate for that increase, right? So you go to the grocery store, suddenly it costs twice. My wife tells me every day, Harsha, I cannot believe how much it costs at the nearby supermarket, right? So people are going to have to cut down, at 450 rupees a liter, would you be able to just, take off and go to golf for lunch? Probably not, right? So a lot of cutting back, and because people will have to prioritize what is important, health, kids' education is probably going to come way on top, right? So parents will probably have to sacrifice to make sure they have enough money for their children. So luxuries will have to be cut. Foreign holidays probably will take a long time. But then if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, people who are on low income, they're going to be catastrophic. How are they going to manage? Where is the money going to come from? And also look at the SME. The other day, this lady had said they might lose some, 100,000 jobs. Right? If SMEs go under, if corporates start laying off, self-employment becomes difficult. Even somebody, say, making cakes, Can people afford to buy those cakes? At, now probably 3,000-4,000 rupees a cake is going to be very difficult, right? So everywhere is going to be demand destruction. So reduce consumption. So that's the kind of, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but the way I see that's what's going to happen, right? So to get out of this country will have to grow. There must be economic growth. Where is that growth going to come from, right? So we got to think about linking this country with the rest of the world. Building bridges and linking up with what I call global production networks. Unshackling the restrictive laws and regulations that governments in the past have sort of subjected the private sector to. This permit, that permit, this fellow has to be paid off, that fellow has to be paid off. Doing business has become such a nightmare. So you have to unshackle this economy. So in order to do that, you'll have to do trade reforms, you'll have to do investment reforms, you have to do fiscal, institutional reforms. This country will have to completely change, right? And the statist thinking will have to go away. We have to start thinking like Dubai, or we're going to start thinking like Singapore, we're going to start thinking like Vietnam, or we're going to start thinking, for instance, like even Karnataka or Andhra Pradesh or even Tamil Nadu. See how lively those economies are, So it's going to be a complete change, right? And we will get there. We will get there. I'm very optimistic. Only 23 million people, not even that. Smaller than a big city in India. We can certainly do it, right? If you have the right attitude, right thinking, people are all on the same page and are willing to go through a tough time before this thing turns around. So that's, in a nutshell, how I see.
Dr. Harsha, do you think we will have a food shortage in the near future?
I mean, if you listen to the experts, there seems to be a fair probability of, a severe restriction in the availability of food. There are two reasons. One is imported food, whether we'll have sufficient dollars to bring in the food. The other one is locally produced, our own, rice and, vegetables and chilies and everything else that we consume. And of course, fish and poultry and meat. So if you break this down, you see, we have never had a problem with our staple rice. We produce in the two crops, harvest, meaning the Maha and the Yala, more than sufficient rice, paddy to be converted, have say 4 million metric tons, which is sufficient, right? If we have, just over 2.5 million metric tons, we can manage. But what happened? The president, in an still to be explained decision, banned the import of chemical fertilizer, without which nothing can grow, right? Purportedly to become the first country in the world to have a completely organic agricultural system. I don't know who advised him. If he just Googled, he would have realized that is not possible. Just a simple Google check would have convinced him otherwise. But he did it. And that was one of the two things he has done to destroy this nation of ours. The other thing is not related to food. Now, we have no rice. It's crazy. I created something called Shakti Rice, which was a cooperative of small and medium rice mill owners in 8 districts. We had 200 rice mill owners, 10,000 farmers. The election was, I think, on the 19th of November 2019. The day previous to that, samba was sold at 85 rupees a kilo. Today samba is about 260 rupees a kilo, right? Now, we have asked foreign countries or other countries to ship food to us, rice, Vietnam, Myanmar, India. But as you probably know, there is going to be a crisis globally. And some countries are saying we are no longer going to export any food because we need that food. Our citizens need all the food that we can produce. So if that happens, it is going to be a catastrophe. And Georgieva Kristalina, the IMF chief, just this week said, please do not do that, because lots of countries who are going to be in a serious shortage of food. And the world has recognized some 40 countries that would face a major problem. And the top two countries are Afghanistan and Sri Lanka, right? So how do we get over this? I know Prime Minister Vikramasinghe has now set up a committee to think about even home gardens. You know, can we grow a little, plot of vegetables? You know, it's come to that level of desperation. You know, he's even talking about rooftops and things like that, and utilizing all unutilized railway land and whatever else is available. So they will come up with some plan. But things are going to be very different in terms of the affordability and availability of food in the next year or so than we have seen in the past. You know, you can blame many people for this, but it's not going to change where we are. Right? We have to at least think about from here on out. When the Prime Minister mentions this in Parliament, I told him, look, you know, you need to think about greenhouse, because efficiency in open field agriculture is very low. Productivity of farmers, the productivity is very, very low. But the moment farmers move into greenhouses, boom, it goes up, right? Because of climate change, you know, the weather has changed. The rainy season is not as predictable as it used to be, you know, dry weather. So we got to move to more technology in farming, right? And also once it is done, storage. I'll give you one example. There is no proper storage for agricultural produce in Sri Lanka. You know, I know this very well because I'm the one who initiated what is called Prabhasura in Dambulla, right next to the main market, 3-acre plot. We started building Sri Lanka's first climate controlled warehouse for agriculture. I broke it into 6 separate chambers because as it was the first one, we wanted to make sure that we get it right and we could use it for onions or for chilies or for potatoes. So we control the humidity and temperature and we could get it right. We got money free from India to do this, 525 million rupees through the embassy. We got 300, I put from my ministry 225, right? And then on the day we left government, it was half done. Would you believe it? It is still half done. And we are talking about food crisis. 5,000 metric tons of agricultural produce can be stored there. Nobody has gone there. I have gone there more times than these government ministers have. Why on earth cannot they finish this? Right? So distribution, storage, post-harvest, waste, inefficiency. So given this crisis, at least I hope if anybody is watching this who can act on this should do this. So both policy-wise, plant pathology-wise, technology-wise, we got to change. Otherwise, we'll be in real difficulty.
With all this going on, Dr. Harsha, do you think we will, face state of anarchy again?
I mean, that is a crazy situation to even imagine, even after, 3 single malls, because that will be complete sort of destruction of social order. You know, what is anarchy? I mean, it's no rule of law. You know, it's unimaginable. But it has happened in countries where the economy tanked completely, and unemployment went up to 60-70%, inflation went up to 100-200%, and people lost all hope, and politicians were selfish, still trying to benefit themselves. There was no unity. In such cases, people, when they realize they have absolutely nothing else to do, right, they will take the law into their own hands and break into supermarkets, rich people's homes, stop cars, mug people, take away your watch or your jewelry, and just, the military will have to be called in, people will be shot, riots will happen, bloodshed will happen, and it will turn into absolutely chaotic situation, which we absolutely not want, and we must do everything in our capacity as citizens to stop this country from descending into that. So I fervently hope that we would never go there. Because you asked this question, I wanted to give you an answer. But having said that, it is up to the president really to at least now act responsibly, realize that his actions are the primary cause, for this situation that we are in, because he's got all power concentrated in his hand, that he needs to mend his ways, change his thinking, because he will have to start thinking about this country, not about himself and his family. I know this is not politics, but I have to say this because this is the reality. So I'm hoping that there would be some political solution to this sort of impasse here, and we would truly be able to create a unity national government so that everybody puts their shoulder to the wheel and make sure that this country moves forward, not backwards.
Dr. Harsha, what have you got to say for the private sector corporate leaders who are in two minds, like, looking at also a greener pasture overseas, or like, should we stay back here and try it out? What is your advice for them?
I come from a sort of a corporate background myself. I've worked in private sector. That's how I, started my sort of adult life, and I've been an entrepreneur. I created company, successful experience, and I have my own. My wife and I have our own investments in agriculture and others. So I kind of, have a sense of what it means to run a company, deal with the various government and banks and all of that, trade unions. And so it is tough, but it is good, right? I mean, you create wealth. Now, when you hit a rut like this, what do we do, right? Our own investments in companies, we know, are running into very difficult situations right now. But you have to stay strong, and you got to, employ strategies, perhaps that you only thought would come into play in a situation like this, right? SOS, so how do you keep your employees from going hungry? Can you hold on to at least their jobs, right? Can you cut down, wherever you could? Can you reduce some other unnecessary expenditure, because revenue is going to be tough, if you are a local company. But on the other hand, sometimes competition will sort of give way, because not everybody is strong enough to compete. So if competition falls off, sometimes you may increase your own market share, and you probably won't even realize that there is a problem on the ground. But what about the guys who cease to exist? What about them? What about their employees? So is the company CEO responsible to think about others? Is her objective only her company and her shareholders? So that's a question she will have to ask herself and her board. Do I think of some sort of greater social responsibility? Let's talk about CSR. A lot of this is nonsense. This is brand building anyway. But in this context, really, you have to consider your conscience would come to play, right? So you have to fight this, right? But now, I speak to a lot of top corporate people, and something I see in all of them is the real urge to come out and help at this point. I applaud the private sector at this point, because I know personally, people who've lent the government, tens of millions of dollars, so they can unload the LP gas consignment or a diesel or petrol consignment. I know people who've done that. I know people who are continuing to do that. Then there's also been coming together of the different chambers of commerce, for instance. Folks like Mishko, this army lead in the Ceylon chamber, has been able to bring the other chambers also together, the National Chamber, the COIL, the others, and extend their support to try to find solutions to the greater macroeconomic problems going beyond their own companies and their industries. CEOs and other business people have been appointed as advisors to the president also. So I think private sector has been working with a lot of responsibility. And I also know a lot of people in the tourism sector, for instance, big guys, small guys, how they're suffering, and all the moratoria are coming to an end. How are they going to pay back these loans? I know people who have individual Airbnbs who are now unable to meet their debt obligations. Just today, a person called me. He cried. He has a hotel in Kandy. I don't want to mention the name. He said he worked 21 hours in Cyprus. Did 4 to 5 jobs a day to save $65,000 and built a small hotel in Kandy. And now he can't meet payments on his loan, and it has ballooned, and the banks are not, he said, is not at all trying to empathize with him, and they want to just get rid of this bad debt. And he cried today. He said, please help me, right? People have gone, these are all private sector, so he's the CEO of his nice little hotel, employs maybe 20, 30 people, right? And then, of course, even the big hotels, the big hotels, privately owned hotels, some have gone completely, belly up. So, multiple issues. So, yes, your primary responsibility to your shareholders, but also in this context, we got to probably think a lot broader, lot wider as society, because we all, like I said, have to put our shoulder to the wheel. So the only surefire shot is anything that brings in dollars. Right? So we as a nation must refocus our resources to produce things that other people outside this country will want to buy. I mean, that is a fundamental thing that we need to drill into our heads. So all these crony capitalists who get close to whoever is in government, politically align themselves and put up big tariff walls so that nothing can come in and they can profit, hand over fist, buy the fanciest car, build the fanciest house, boast about French wine they have in the evening, or wear some Louis Vuitton or some nonsensical, 500,000 rupee, pair of shoes or some, I don't even know how much they cost. Conspicuous consumption, by how? By, basically corruption. Businesses and political powers together being corrupt and basically, extracting value and wealth that should be made available to others in society. Some people do contracts, they build roads or other things at 3 times, 4 times the cost. Right? They will have to speak to their conscience when they go to temple or to church or to kovil or to mosque. They will have to ask themselves, are we doing the right thing? It doesn't matter which religion, which religion that you belong to, what you follow, what your beliefs are. But I believe this is the time to reflect on those things also.
And that's the end of the show. Thank you, Dr. Harsha, for joining us. Signing off, Ms. Shobya Clinton.